Hey, Stoney here with another game of Mechabellum, and this is the final game of the Weekend Tournament America. Let's go. At the bottom here, we have Zililak playing as a giant spec, and he's up against the infamous B-Man from the 201 server playing as a Farseer specialist. A blue player started off with very aggressively placed Stormcallers. I think this is a potential transition into some sort of giant, maybe fort, maybe Typhoon push into the red player. And the red player also with Stormcallers are placing them rather uh, defensively. Now, one thing that I hate to play aggro into these days is steel balls with range and heavy target or fortified target lock. Because, for example, if you have typhoons right here, your opponent could just have steel balls right here with range and target lock, and immediately your typhoon will be targeted and will be killed within the first 5 seconds. So I've always been a big fan of aggro plays, but in the last 2 weeks, I have just been a little apprehensive about that kind of style because I have been burned just a few too many times with the heavy target steel balls. Now let's see what happens in this game. We are setting up for a pretty aggressive position. We got crawlers on the line. We got fangs on the line. I'm going to suspect some sort of fortress play, maybe down here. So we'll see. Round one, none of the players added any CHAFF-CLEAR, so it's just going to be fan on fan and crawler on crawler. But it seems like it's very hard to tell, right, with this kind of Stormcaller game, because one well-placed volley from the Stormcaller is just going to kill every single one. It looks like those crawlers on the left-hand side may be doing a little bit of damage, but nope, just as I was saying it, the crawlers got killed off, so now it's just a pure storm on storm action. All right. Let's speed this up. All right, looks like B-Man is going to take the first round just by a little bit. The reinforcement drop, I think when you're playing things on the line, advanced missile device is going to be great for B-Man. I think he's not only able to deal with some of the heavier chaff, but if he needs to, and in an emergency, if he needs to pop some shields, he can use this tool to do that. Missile strike is going to be a pick for Zililak. I think that is going to work against the Stormcallers, but for B-Man, we'll see what happens. All right, it's going to be missile strike from both players, and both players are just targeting the Stormcallers. I suspect there will be any missile on here because right now, we're still fairly early in the game, and both players just had a huge amount of chaff. B-Man added in a pair of Phoenixes here, anticipating the Stormcaller actually getting rid of the fans, so the Phoenixes can reign supreme. This is a common strategy when you're up against your opponent, is that if you know that your ground army, or if you already have a heavy counter against your opponent's anti-air, then it would be okay to just have anti-air, have air units rather as a safety unit, knowing that your opponent may not be able to kill it at the end of the round. But so far though, it looks like the Stormcallers on the left-hand side quickly fell, which means yes, we do still have Stormcallers on the ground, but we also have a ton of crawlers running towards the tower, which means even though the Stormcallers are really good at killing fans, I feel like these crawlers should be able to give Zililak the edge to take down these Phoenixes with these fans. But we'll see though. The Stormcaller RNG is pretty good. All right, excellent. Get into round 3 so far. Zililak has been winning the first couple rounds. Reinforcement cards. Bolt-on emission could be very interesting. Improved melting point is picked for somebody that's playing aggro. That's very interesting, considering right now most of the units at the front consist of chaff. So if anything, I would expect Zililak to just go heavier into CHAFF-CLEAR for a little bit. But no, it's just going to be improved melting point. For a red player, I think improved melting point actually makes a whole lot more sense for a red player than it is for a blue player being a defensive unit. Additional deployment could also be interesting, but right now I think both players might just need a bit more chaff clear because these crawlers are just running amok here. There's really no answer to these crawlers. One way you can do is to turn your fans into chaff clear by giving them range, and it also protects them a little bit from the stone crawlers. B-Man decided to add in some dedicated chaff clear in the form of these Mustangs. They're not the best chaff clear, but they are decent, and they also serve a dual purpose later on if it needs to be a anti-missile unit or if it needs to be some sort of a screen for your bigger giants, because the melting point, what they do is they will shoot, they will kill the chaff, but as the chaff is cleared, they move forward in front of the giants and provide some tanking. So now you can see very apparently that the blue player is losing the chaff war. We still have crawlers streaming through. All right, and now we have the Mustangs providing the screen and the Farseer doing his best to get this melting point down. But I think the real MVP is going to be the Stormcrawlers. I think they're the primary damage output here onto this melting point. And finally, you see here is where the Phoenixes really go to work here. So overall, a very balanced board coming in from our red player. For our blue player, I think next turn is going to be some sort of clear. I just don't see it working if you just keep spamming melting point. Right now, there's really nothing for the melting point to get any meaningful damage anyways. The biggest unit on the board is a Farseer. So right now, I see it as a bit of a waste. But I wouldn't hurry and sell the melting point just yet, because as the game goes on, you are inevitably going to see some type of giant. And speaking of giants, we got a lot of great options. I think for Ziliac, Fire Badger could be a great option. Tarantula could be a great option. Both are good on the line and they're great at serving the role of chaff clear. For our red player here, Sledgehammer in a vertical configuration is going to be great against melting point. All right, so it's going to be Sledgehammers for both sides. Curious. I don't know if the Sledgehammers themselves actually provide enough of a chaff clear, but they are good for our blue player into the Mustangs. The problem with the Sledgehammer is that they're kind of mediocre with chaff clear, and Fire Badger would be just as tanky and just as good into the Mustangs. So I would definitely prefer Fire Badgers over the Sledgehammers. Tarantula is also interesting when you have them on the line. When you take range, and also later on, if you want, take Spider Mine, it will be very effective against a board like this. Range can pretty much kill all the chaff, and Tarantula is a much more efficient chaff clear than these Sledgehammers. And with range, they can contest the Mustangs very comfortably as well. One thing I'm super curious about is why the second melting point. So far, we really haven't seen any commitment into giants, so I feel like this is very premature. If anything, I will put down a third Stormcaller just because of how many small units they are. Now, with the third Stormcaller, you are at a potential risk of just having Mustangs to go with anti-missile. But at the very least, you will bait out the anti-missile if need be. And later on, if you really want the Mustangs to not do any damage, you take a launcher overload and just stagger your Stormcaller a little bit, and then the Mustang will spend pretty much the entire turn shooting at the missile. But for now, if you can, you know, take a look at the melting point. I mean, this guy is doing 12,000 damage, right? And is finally locking onto some of the larger units. This guy doing 21,000 damage. But here's the thing with melting points, though, right? Every time it lock onto a giant, it will almost guarantee a kill, and a giant, even starting from the smallest giant on the ground, which is a melting point, and that's almost 30,000 damage. So if you're seeing sub 30,000 damage on a melting point in that round, chances are your melting point really aren't that useful. All right, B-Man is taking the round once again, just by having a slightly more efficient comp. I think the reason why B-Man is winning because we have a total of, and these are improved melting points, so they have 500 supplies a pop. A total of 1,000 plus the unlocking fee of 200. Actually, this is giant, so just 1,000 supplies lock onto these melting point. All right, so here's the melting point, pivoting into something that is a bit more efficient into the red spore. So that's going to be range and multi-melter. Now, keep in mind that range, well, improved melting point does come with the additional 20 range. So we got range and multi-melter. You're still looking at 145, so that's quite good. This round for our blue player is going to be efficient giant, so that hints we're going to have more multi-melters on the ground. And for our red player is going to be efficient light manufacturing, hinting that it's going to be a lot more small units. The multi-melter is going to be great into things like sledgehammers. It can even contest things like the Scorpion. Improved melter does outrange Scorpion, even if they take range by about 5 meters. It's not huge, but it is something. However, I am deeply concerned about the blues boards and its lack of chaff clear. And speaking of lack of chaff clear, he actually sold one of his Stormcallers, which are actually doing a lot of chaff clearing. If you click on the Stonecaller on the left hand side, you'll notice that it was doing 28,000 damage, but it was just killing so many more units. So I don't care if the multi-melters are great at dealing with medium-sized units, but if you're shooting at crawlers all day, that's not where you want your melting points to work at. And you can tell this is very apparent on the far right. This melting point has been spending this entire round so far shooting at crawlers. He's just barely getting over 10,000 damage here. The one on the left hand side is doing better. I mean, for a melting point that is now double tagged, you wanted to do a little bit more. This melting point may be able to get the Scorpion. I think it can. Now it is locked on and getting into full charge here, but we still have these level 2 Stormcallers, and they are going to do a lot of damage. And of course, there are also these Phoenixes, but I think the MVP is going to be these Stormcallers. They're just dishing out so much damage onto a giant like this. All right, great round for our red player. Going to round 6. None of the cards is really good for blue. I think if I were blue, I'd probably take the Rhino and sell it. And instead, I would use that money to buy 3 Vulcans, maybe with Firebomb. That might be the way to go. For our red player, might be a Rhino sell as well. All right, so there's going to be a Rhino. No, the blue actually didn't sell the Rhino. Instead, it's just going to put the high-level Rhino all the way in the back here. I'm curious why this was the case. I mean, I get it. There's the Phoenixes on the other side guarding, but I feel like the Stonecallers deal a little bit more damage than the Phoenixes. Looking onto the board here, instead of going to be another Vulcan, it's going to be another melting point. So I think blue is severely underestimating the amount of chaff that's currently on the board here. Armor on the tank. I'm not sure what that will do, because these tanks will actually get killed first by the Scorpions, which means they would never actually get a chance to contest the Mustangs. We got EM on the Stormcallers. Okay, so this board is just becoming better and better for red, and for blue is it's not looking so good. And the refusal to deal with chaff is going to be his undoing. All right, we'll see how this round goes. Tank gets instant locked by the Scorpions. Already half of the tank is going down. The one on the left-hand side is surviving a little bit longer because of the high-level Rhino, but the Rhino itself is only dealing, what, 6,000, 8,000 damage before it gets taken out. The multi-melter is trying to do his best, but without chaff clear, it's going to be spending most of his time shooting at crawlers and fangs. The multi-melter towards the left is finally trying desperately to get on some larger targets. But now the Scorpion is already doing his work. Oh man, the melter continues to get stuck on Mustangs and of course, well, crawlers. Alright, finally some melter is getting onto target. And one of them is actually locking onto the tower. So with the tower down, we actually can see a potential win coming in here for our blue player. Sometimes in the later rounds like this, right, when you see a win like this, it's actually quite dangerous because it reaffirms your confirmation bias that you don't actually need CHAFF-CLEAR. And I think there must be something going on, right? Because for anyone that's kind of looking outside in, it's very apparent that you need CHAFF-CLEAR on your board. But for some reason, I think there is this blind trust into the multi-melter. And how it can be sort of a decent CHAFF-CLEAR. And now if he's winning this round, he might get into that pigeon code even further. We'll see. Round 7, lots of great cards. Instant should be a must pick for both sides. Rhino Assault is interesting, but let's take a look at the back line here. Both players' back lines are fairly well defended. One interesting thing you can do, for example, if you want to do instant with the red player, is you can actually instant right here on a diagonal line and then drop your Rhino right here. All crawlers are going to be forced running into the fire. The Rhino is going to come in here, clear out maybe 2 or 3 crawlers, and then just I'm going to head straight to the tower. That might actually be the best play, but you can't pick instant and Rhino at the same time. One thing you can do, though, is you can get instant on the back here, phoenixes right here, and then the crawler. Oh, speaking of phoenixes, here are the phoenixes. But no instant though, it's just going to be phoenix cheese. So if you're going to do phoenix cheese here, you will need a mobile beacon because I feel like the phoenixes are going to get pulled by the crawler for a little while. So take the mobile beacon and just go straight across. Triple teching the melting point now with crawler production, again refusing to answer the lack of CHAFF-CLEAR, and it's just going to add 4 melting points. So this is exactly what I was talking about. Sometimes you get a lucky win out of a round and then all of a sudden you feel like you're being validated. Your strategy is being validated even if the strategy is severely wrong, and that's exactly what happened. You saw the multi-melter actually doing decent with some CHAFF-CLEAR, and all of a sudden you decided, you know what? I don't need a Vulcan, I don't need CHAFF-CLEAR, I just need more multi-melter. And there it is what's happened. Alright, the cheese worked, which means the multi-melter are soon going to get disabled by the melting point, which means they are just regular melters trying to power down individual crawlers one by one. The big melter on the left hand side is already getting logged on by a bunch of steel balls, but unfortunately they weren't able to kill that. We continue to have storm crawlers just raining death on top of these melters. I mean, they're doing their best, but without CHAFF-CLEAR, with all the Mustangs still on the board, just becoming a little bit too rough for them. It's not going to be the final round, I don't think, but it is going to get very close. Oh, never mind. This, oh, it's so close. I thought it would have one more Scorpion. That would have been the final round. Triple arc lights. I mean, if I were Zodiac, I'd take the triple arc lights. I'll get range, and I might even get elite on the arc lights. I mean, they're just so good at dealing not just the chaff, but they can do decent damage into sledgehammers as well. Triple arc lights actually picked by B-Man, but for our blue player, it's going to be a boat. I'm not sure what the purpose of the boat is. It might be just for selling, or I mean, if you're keeping the boat, I don't know what the purpose of the boat is. We have so many Mustangs that's on the ground here, and also we have so many Phoenixes. I think he's just really going hard into this multi-melter setup. The problem though is blue would just keep making more crawlers, more fangs, and relying on the EM storm crawlers to disable your multi-melter. Now, granted, at round 8, there is a point where you reach critical mass on your melters, right? So if you have enough of any unit, you can do CHAFF-CLEAR pretty much with any unit. And this is where we're seeing. Right now, we're looking at 6 multi-melters, all mostly on one side. And these 6 multi-melters can fire at 5 different units at the same time. So that is, 30 units at any given time. And because they can kill things fairly quickly because they're improved, you might be able to have somewhat of a decent chaff there. We'll see. I mean, the first couple rounds of crawlers were all being defeated, and of course we still have sledgehammers and a little bit of fans left. The second round of crawlers are coming in. On the left hand side, the big melter is trying to lock onto the steel balls, and they're actually not doing too bad. And now we're coming into the mid-round chaff wave, and now that's with some sledgehammers. We already have crawlers onto the scorpion, but now they're acid scorpions, which means they can take down the melters fairly quickly, and all 4 melters fell on the far right. On the left hand side, we have stone crawlers just continuously eating these melters, but they're never going to be able to get to the tower fast enough. And they're just sitting ducks here. Now we've got acid scorpions walking over, and that's going to be the game. So what's the lesson learned here? Well, the lesson learned here is never neglect your chaff clear. We have been seeing a weakness in chaff clear since pretty much round 4. And yes, multi-melter is very good in the later rounds, but if you can't effectively get rid of those Mustangs, get rid of those crawlers, you're never going to be able to hit those larger targets. I think there were a few opportunities, right? The first unit drop, you get the choice between sledgehammers or Tarantula. I think Tarantula would have been a much better choice. The other unit drop, you get the option of these level 4 arc lights. I think it would be an excellent choice. So because he skipped both and instead just went hard into mass multi-melter, he eventually lost the game. So great game, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see another game like this, here's another video for you, and I will see you on the next one.
Prepare your tactics, Mechabellum's calling. Deploy your fortress, the battlefield's alive with swarms.